Non-steroid hormones, second messengers, are important for the functioning of it. The hormone receptors are in the cell membrane, and it's responsible for the formation of CAMP. Little c, big AMP. All right? Steroid hormones, on the other hand, the hormone receptors are in the nuclei, in the nucleus. The hormone receptors are in the nucleus, and protein synthesis, I'm trying to remember this from memory, and I'm sorry I don't. Protein synthesis happens in the cell. It causes protein synthesis in the cell. Okay? I don't know if that's any better. It's probably not, but it is what it is. All right. So just remember that hormones can use both positive feedback, and that's where both of the hormones raise at the same rate or raise at the same time, or both of them lower at the same time. Or they can use a negative feedback, which is, like I said, where one of them increases and the other one decreases. Like TSH, it'll increase as T3s and T4s lower, 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 lower. Then when T3s and T4s increase, TSH decreases. It's the opposite, okay? Another name for the anterior pituitary gland is called the adenohypophysis or hypophysis. All right. So we need to remember that TSH is secreted by the adenohypophysis because that's the anterior pituitary. Anterior pituitary is also known as the adenohypophysis, and we know that TSH comes from the adenohypophysis or the anterior pituitary, and it stimulates the thyroid hormone. The anterior pituitary secretes TSH. Oxytocin and ADH is produced by the posterior pituitary. All right. FSH, we said, stimulates the primary and ovarian follicle to develop. And that just makes sense because FSH means follicle stimulating hormone. So it stimulates the ovarian follicle to develop, which then turns into an egg. All right. Oxytocin, what did we say oxytocin was for? We said that it's released by the posterior pituitary gland. We said that it stimulates uterine contraction. And if you want to know, oxytocin actually uses a positive feedback mechanism. So as oxytocin is produced more and more and more, there's more and more and more uterine contraction. As oxytocin decreases, then uterine contraction decreases. As oxytocin increases, the desire to cuddle increases. As oxytocin decreases, the desire to cuddle decreases. All right? And then ADH, listen to me. ADH, remember, we said that it decreases the urine secretion. If it decreases urine secretion, that means it allows more water to be reabsorbed by the kidney. Make sure that you know that the thyroid gland produces T3s, T4s, and calcitonin, and that calcitonin causes a decrease in the blood calcium. And know that calcitonin and parathyroid hormone act as opposites. Aldosterone is a mineral corticoid, and that's produced by the adrenal glands, because adrenal glands are responsible for sugar, salt, sex. Sugar is the glucocorticoid. Mineral corticoid is the salt, and a name of a mineral corticoid is aldosterone. Okay, and because we know that mineral corticoids increase blood sodium levels, we also know that it decreases blood potassium. All right, aldosterone is a mineral corticoid, and all mineral corticoids increase blood sodium and decrease blood potassium. Aldosterone mainly affects the cells of the kidney. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid. Cortisol is our stress hormone, and it stimulates gluconeogenesis. Okay, it also is made in the outer zone of the adrenal cortex, and it has the exact opposite effect of aldosterone. Okay, it's a glucocorticoid. It's made in the outer and middle zone of the adrenal cortex. It has an anti-immunity effect. It has the opposite effect of aldosterone. I think I'm telling you all the things that you need to know. Remember that it stimulates gluconeogenesis. Androgens, that's where you know how I said that the adrenal glands are responsible for sugar, salt, and sex? Let me go over that. Sugar is a glucocorticoid. It's made in the middle zone of the adrenal cortex. It's cortisol is the name of it. It has an anti-immunity effect, and it stimulates gluconeogenesis, which basically means the production of new glucose cells. Okay? Whereas aldosterone has the effects mostly on the kidney. It's a mineral corticoid, and it's responsible for regulating salt by increasing blood sodium levels and decreasing blood potassium levels. Androgens, we said, was the hormone that's produced in the adrenal glands, and that's what regulates sex. So we said the adrenal glands, sugar, salt, sex. Sex goes with the androgens, and there it's secreted by the inner zone of the adrenal cortex. All right? Aldosterone is the outer zone. Cortisol is the middle zone of the adrenal cortex, and androgens are the inner zone. All right, and remember that epinephrine and norepinephrine is released in response to stress. All right, then we have glucagon and insulin. Glucagon accelerates liver glyconeolysis, and insulin is made by beta cells in the pancreas. It has the opposite effect of glucagon, and it decreases the blood glucose level. Okay? Glucagon accelerates liver glycogenolysis. A decrease in insulin production usually is associated with type 1 diabetes. We said that the ovary secretes estrogen. Corpus luteum is responsible for progesterone. Testosterone, we said, is produced by the interstitial cells of the testes, and it's the masculinizing hormone. One other gland that we didn't talk about yet is called the thymus gland. It produces thymosin, and the thing that's interesting about this is that it is found in our mediastinum or the mediastinum, and it actually works real well when we're young, but as we age, it stops working. It is responsible for T cells. The pineal gland does melatonin, and it's sometimes referred to as the third eye. All right. We talked about, make sure that you really remember non-steroid and steroid hormones. Remember that prolactin is also known as lactogenic hormones, or the beginning. Genic means genesis, or the beginning, and lacto means milk. Remember, prolactin for lactation, so it's the production of milk after birth. All right. T4s. T4s need iodine in order for it to be produced. If you lack iodine, then you're not going to have a proper amount of T4. Hormone that's the opposite of calcitonin is parathyroid hormone. T3 and T4 is the opposite of TSH. Remember that aldosterone, because it is a mineral corticoid, has an impact on potassium and sodium. It's going to increase the sodium and decrease the potassium. A hormone that influences how fat is metabolized is called leptin. Melatonin has an effect on the body's internal clock. Exocrine glands. Exocrine glands do not stimulate receptors in target cells. Okay, so we said that the anterior pituitary gland was also known as the adeno hypophysis. So remember, anterior A, adeno hypophysis A. Anterior adeno hypophysis. And the posterior pituitary gland is also called neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis, posterior pituitary gland. That produces oxytocin and ADH. All right. Out of all of the glands, out of all of the hormones that the anterior pituitary gland produces, one of the ones that should stick out to you is called prolactin, because prolactin does not cause growth of something, okay? Thyroid stimulating hormone causes the production of TSH, T3s, T4s. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, that's the ACTH, that releases or stimulates the adrenal glands. Luteinizing hormone, that stimulates the production of progesterone. Okay, so just keep that in mind. G protein works with non-steroid hormones. Nitric oxide is a second messenger. Because it's a second messenger, it's important in non-steroid hormone production. Okay, we talked about prostaglandins. You have two types of prostaglandins. You have PGA and PGE. PGB is not a class of prostaglandins. It's PGA, PGE. Okay, so remember that the thymus gland is in the mediastinum, the thyroid and the parathyroid gland is in the neck. It's important to also know that the endocrine and the nervous system perform the same general functions. They carry messages. Endocrine glands secrete hormones. Sorry, I'm just looking through, making sure that I hit all the important things. Okay, remember that nitrogen oxide is associated with non-steroid hormones, because we said nitric oxide was a second messenger. Make sure that you remember this piece here, that non-steroid, the differences between non-steroid and steroid. That's going to be really important for you to know. And then make sure that you understand that what a negative feedback system is, what a positive feedback system is. Remember, an example of positive feedback system is oxytocin and uterine contractions. As oxytocin increases, uterine contraction increases. And then remember that TSH and T3, T4s are negative feedback. So when TSH is high, T3, T4s are low. As T3s, T4s are high, TSH is low. All right? And also remember that calcitonin and parathyroid are opposites of each other, which makes them a negative feedback too. So that when the parathyroid hormone is high, calcitonin is low. When calcitonin is high, parathyroid is low. Okay, so something that you may want to be aware of is one of the main differences between the anterior and posterior pituitary glands is that one of them is made of glandular tissue and one is made of nerve tissue. And that the pituitary gland sits in the Turkish saddle. Remember, a tropic hormone, the word tropic means that it causes another endocrine gland to release its hormone or grow. That's why ACTH is a tropic, growth hormone is a tropic, melanocyte stimulating hormone is a tropic. The only hormone released by the anterior pituitary or the adenohypophysis is prolactin, because it does not release, it doesn't cause another gland to release its hormone or to grow. Make sure that you also understand the target organs for the different hormones, like TSH is for the thyroid, ACTH is for the adrenal glands, melanocyte stimulating hormone is for the melanin, FSH is for the ovarian follicle. LH is for the corpus luteum, which is luteinizing hormone, LH. Okay. Make sure that you know that males and females both produce FSH and LH. So you remember when we talked about the posterior pituitary gland, and we were saying that oxytocin and ADH are both synthesized in the hypothalamus, but they're released by the posterior pituitary gland. So then it would make sense that if something happened in the hypothalamus, then it would cause a problem in oxytocin or in ADH. And remember that T4 is the most abundant thyroid hormone. Okay, make sure that you look over pancreatic cells. You have alpha cells and you have beta cells. Alpha cells are responsible for glucagon release, and beta cells are responsible for insulin release. Okay, insulin moves the glucose from the blood into the cells, and alpha releases glucagon, which actually increases the glucose in the blood. Okay. I'm still looking to make sure that I've covered all the things that I should be covering here. Seems like there could be a lot of questions maybe on diabetes mellitus, or mellitus, so make sure that you're looking at things like glucosuria, that you're looking at diabetes mellitus 1 and 2, and you just make sure that you have that very clear in your mind. Okay, G protein helps in the formation of cyclic AMP or CAMP. Glucocorticoids increase gluconeogenesis. I think I've said that several times. Okay. So if I were to give this test, I would really want you to know about endocrine gland and an exocrine gland. I would want you to know that exocrine gland is a type of gland that releases its secretion into a duct. An endocrine gland is a gland that releases chemicals into the blood. Endocrine is in the blood, exocrine is in a duct. So I would want you to know what a releasing hormone is, what a tropic hormone is, what the neurohypophysis is, which should be the posterior pituitary gland, the adenohypophysis, which is the anterior pituitary gland, second messenger, which remember that the second messenger is a substance needed by non-steroid hormones. Okay. Prostaglandins, know what hyposecretion is and hypersecretion. Hypersecretion is overproduction of a hormone by a gland, and hyposecretion is undersecretion of a gland. Okay, target organ hormone, CAMP. Let's see. CAMP is a substance that is used as a second messenger. That's with non-steroidal hormones. And then I would know THS, TSH is what it should be. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Oxytocin, ACTH, thyroxine, which is T4s. Parathyroid hormone, calcitonin, aldosterone, which is a mineral glucocorticoid. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid. Glucagon, insulin, luteinizing hormone, FSH, prolactin, ADH, epinephrine, melatonin. You should know all of those things and what they do. Okay, and I think that if you'll remember back, we talked about, when we talked about the kidneys, we talked about aldosterone, and then we said that the opposite of aldosterone was ANH, which is the atrial natriuretic hormone, ANH. So it's secreted by cells of the heart, and it does the opposite of aldosterone. So if aldosterone is a mineral corticoid that increases sodium and decreases potassium, then ANH would increase potassium and decrease sodium. So those are the things that I would think that you would know: thyroxine, insulin, testosterone, glucagon, parathyroid hormone, ANH, cortisol, estrogen, epinephrine, melatonin, oxytocin, leptin, remember is associated with fat. TSH, so when you're talking about that, you would need to know the target organs. So like ANH would be the heart, adrenal cortex, that would be cortisol. Beta cells would be insulin, alpha cells would be glucagon, ovaries would be FSH, thyroid would be TSH, parathyroid gland would be parathyroid hormone, posterior pituitary gland would be oxytocin or ADH, testes, testosterone, fat storing cells of the body would be leptin, and so on and so forth. So I believe that in an hour I covered as much as I could cover of this. I'm very sorry that I wasn't there tonight. I had to teach about Alzheimer's tonight, so I am teaching somebody else about Alzheimer's while you guys are learning about this endocrine system. Whatever questions you may have, please write them down. Mike will bring them to me and I'll answer them. If you write them down and your cell number, I'll text you the answer tonight when I come home from work. All right, good luck to you guys. Hope you had a good day at clinicals, and I will see you on the flip side. Bye.